My name is Paul Jansz, and it's fantastic to have you all here today. Now, today's topic, it's going to be a really interesting one, and it's one that I'm really looking forward to. So, how creativity unlocks value. And interesting topic as we take probably a closer look at maybe the left brain, the right brain, maybe some of the science behind that. Is it science? Is it a myth? We're going to find out very soon anyway. So it's fantastic to have everybody here. Let me welcome you to our special guest. It is the creative coach, Wade Kingsley. How are you, mate? Welcome.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on. Hi, everyone.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. It's obviously I've known you for quite a few years, and I've seen some of the TEDx talk that you did a couple of years ago as well, which was fantastic. And now you get to share this on my virtual stage, let's call it.
I like it. And some of the topics you've had before are fantastic as well. So really encourage everyone who hasn't seen them to go back and have a look at those too. But I'm thrilled to be able to talk about my favorite topic, which is creativity.
Magnificent. Now let's start with that. So when we talk about creativity, what is creativity to you?
Well, most of us think that creativity is arts, music, painting, anything to do with that kind of creative pursuit. And of course, that's true. But that's only one form of creativity. That's applied creativity. But creativity really is problem solving. You know, if you've got a problem to solve, unless you've got an instruction manual that tells you step by step on how to solve it, and you don't deviate from that at all, then pretty much everything else is creative problem solving. Creative problem solving could be, how do we attract new customers? Creative problem solving can be used for, how do we try and retain more customers? Creative problem solving can be used for, how do I convince my wife that we should go to New York for a honeymoon, which may or may not be a true story. I can tell you it is. Because effectively what you're trying to do is say, we've got this problem, but there's no obvious solution, or there's no stepped out solution. And what creativity allows you to do is think laterally about the problem, diverge in your thinking, seek alternative perspectives. And we're going to go through some of that on the webinar today.
Is there some key things that you just like to touch on with people with regards to your background as well? Maybe give us a bit, 30 seconds of what your background is, and then share a little bit about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've spent most of my career in the media, marketing and advertising space. And now I run my own business. So I pretty much then say I can go from sales to IT to all the things that you do when you run your own business. But my background really was all about creativity. I loved working in the media industry, but I found myself solving problems. Some of the problems were, how do we attract more audience to our media assets, which is a common thing that media publishers have to do, even more so in this day and age, but also working with advertising clients. And advertising clients usually have problems where we've got this product or service we need to make people aware of, or we've got some brand perception challenges we need to overcome, or we've got a great discount. We just want to make sure that we're delivering that to the right audience who'll take up on that. So in the large part, my experience has been sort of in those spaces. But the thing that I kind of saw as the through line, right from almost childhood even through, was that I was a reasonably good problem solver. And when I say reasonably good, I was able to clearly define what problem we were trying to solve and come up with solutions to do such. And that's really what creativity is. And if you're watching this thinking, well, this isn't for me because I'm not a creative person, you should know that when I run workshops, I actually ask that as the first question. I say, do you believe you're creative? And I can kid you not, Paul, this is exactly how it rolls. 2/3 of the people put their hand up and go, yes, I am. And 1/3 of the people say they're not. And the reality is it's a false economy, because everyone actually is creative. We were created as kids. We deploy our creativity at different stages, at different ways in different stages of our lives. But what we try and do now is we try and attach creativity to problem solving more often when we talk about it. Those of us who do this kind of work, coaching and developing people in creative problem solving, the more people understand its use, the more we can move away from just the traditional stereotypical, oh, well, I'm not a creative person because I don't know how to paint or draw, which are things that are old kind of stereotypes, if you like. Still relevant. People still do it for creativity, but that's not the only way.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, like, if I even look at my own, with my 3 kids, we often refer to my middle child as the creative one. Now, I'm sure other parents do this as well.
Yes,
because the eldest one and the youngest one are sporty. It's not to say that my middle one is not sporty, but he's less sporty, but he's more creative.
Yeah.
But you're right, you sort of associate that more probably, as you sort of mentioned at the start, it's probably more the arty stuff and
Yeah.
more in that creative, the music, the arts, and how he can be a little bit more creative as opposed to sporty.
Oh, absolutely. And look, they're the signposts and stereotypes we've all grown
Yeah,
up with. So there's nothing wrong with thinking that. And look, I'm a creative coach, and I can tell you, I've got one child who is supremely creative and one who is less creative, but they just deploy it in different ways.
that's right.
My daughter is more of a what you'd call traditional applied creative. She's into drawing and arts and editing videos and all sorts of stuff. My son is more of a scientific or analytical creative because he likes solving problems. So he likes knowing, how does that Formula One engine work, and what happens when that plane does this, and what chemical does that mix with? So what I try and always do as kind of a baseline is encourage people to embrace the notion that if you are looking for ways to solve problem, then creativity is for you. And that's really how it can unlock value in a business. You know, if you think about that, you or your teams, really what you want to try and do is you want to have a team of people who can solve problems for customers, solve problems internally in terms of operational problems or systems or supply chains, whatever that looks like. And there's no such thing as a non-creative solution. You either have a solution that someone's already created and you follow those steps step by step, or you're able to have an original thought, an original way of doing something. And then maybe that's been done by another industry. You know, there are famous examples where the way a problem was solved in one industry gets picked up by another, and it's applied differently, but it's just a different way of thinking about it. And we try and avoid kind of terms too like new. You know, people are always under pressure to come up with new ideas. Instead, we want original interpretations because
Yes.
there's no such thing as a new idea. Every idea has already been made, and we just have original interpretations of those ideas applied in different circumstances to different problems. That's what we see.
We're all businesses. We've all got challenges, whether it's personally, whether it's our business wise. I know there's a lot of businesses out there that have got, you know, the old asset rich, cash flow poor type of
Yeah.
challenges as well. And that's where this audience gets challenged by that. So I love the way you're thinking there.
Well, and also it's worth remembering that, you know, you don't have a successful business, no matter what industry you're in, accounting or otherwise, if you're not solving a problem for someone. So if you're solving a problem for a customer, then that's the true value of a business. So once you've got to the point of being able to validate that, this is the problem we solve, this is our experience, our expertise, our skills, our knowledge, then what you want to be able to do is constantly be innovative in the way that you do that. If you did it the same way as you did it 10 years ago, then you'll watch your customers disappear because someone else will come into the market and they'll do it cheaper, better, faster, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
But if you focus on the fact that you can be innovative in the way you solve problems, customers will understand that and they'll want to be part of that. And your challenge then is to, first of all, do it, not just say it. Oh, we're very innovative at this. Well, okay, how and why? What do you actually do? And the second thing is promote that, market that. You know, it is a real point of difference for brands, and we think about this as consumers ourselves. We're always looking for the brands that are looking to do things that are different and interesting and new. They grab our attention. You know, there's a bit of keeping up with the Joneses, I guess. You know, like, oh, we'd like to have the new shiny gadget or the new this, new that. But it all comes from creativity. There's not a problem I can think of in the history of the world that hasn't been solved by someone using a form of creative thinking, critical thinking, and those skills are only going to improve. And I know we're going to talk about AI a bit today as well, because that's sort of bubbling up. But this human skill, the core human skill of being able to solve problems for someone at home, at work, a customer internally, they're not going away, those things. Those skills are really valuable, and there's ones you should keep for developing.
You know, I've often spoken about this, whether it be on podcasts or on these sorts of shows, when I talk to people in terms of the opportunity that exists for our accounting industry as well. And, you know, you mentioned the two letters before with artificial intelligence, AI coming in. There's an opportunity for all accountants to become more creative in the way that you're just putting through. Because you're right, business owners are always going to have problems or challenges that they need to work through, but it's the questions that you need to ask them. You might necessarily not have all the answers, but you know what? I'll guarantee the people that are watching this have got connections to the people that will have the answer as well.
Exactly. And I think, you know, I've got a really good accountant. And I think about what her core skill is. She's great at asking questions, you know, and the interesting thing about that for me is when I'm coaching people and we're working on helping them build their confidence so they can feel more creative, solve more problems, the first sign I look for is the curiosity.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got someone who's asking questions that have a breadth to them, and what I mean by that is not just the line and length questions, which are what do you do, what's your income, that kind of stuff, but you're having people who say, so how are you thinking about that? Tell me why what your perspective is that. Why do you believe that? And are asking questions that go beyond the fundamentals.
Yes.
Curiosity is a really big tell, and a way to validate that for yourselves is think about right now someone you believe is the most creative person you know, or someone is one of the most creative people you know.
Yep.
I guarantee you, if you kind of drill down as to what makes them creative, they're curious, and they're curious about lots of different things. They're not just into scuba diving, they're into scuba diving and death metal music and this sort of diverse range of stuff, because it's curiosity itself that drives that inquiry, and the inquiry drives the creativity.
There's always been this interesting thought process. That's how I'll put it through. This interesting thought process that, you know, the left brain is the analytical brain and the right brain is the creative brain. Obviously, we've got a lot of left brain, analytical, blue brain people on this particular show. So can a left brain thinker become a right brain thinker?
The short answer is yes, but I'll give you the longer answer since we've got time. So there's a lot of interesting work in the area of neuroscience and looking at this phenomenon of left brain and right brain thinking. And certainly, you know, that has carried true for a long period of time, that there are left brain does this and right brain does that. A lot of the more recent research has found that creativity is more of a whole of brain activity. Now, what that means is it doesn't mean that you are one side or the other. It means that sometimes the brain has to switch modes in order to get tasks done. So an example I'll give you is the two classic kind of skills you need for creative thinking are what's called divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is what you traditionally associate with right brain, which is, well, we need to think of multiple different ways to do it. And the common test that has been used for forever is the house brick test. And the house brick test is, here is a house brick. Think of different ways to use the house brick. Because if you think literally, then you just go, well, it's to build a wall in a house. If you start to think laterally, you go, well, what about if we were to use it as a doorstop? What about if we were to use it as a flower pot? If you put two on top and then you put the flowers in the hole of the brick. What about a window breaking device? You could use it for lots of different things. So what you want your sort of your right brain to do in that mode is to diverge as much as possible to get the multiples and different variant of answers and potential. And then you want the left brain to come in and converge, as in like, okay, we've got the options. Now we want to kind of nail down into the one that we think is going to solve the problem for us, etc. So I guess I have a bit of frustration with the whole left right brain thing, because most people I meet who want to learn about their creativity, it's not that they're left or right brain, it's that they feel like they favor more than the other one. And it's not quite as simple as saying you're either left-handed or right-handed and then there's people who are ambidextrous. It's like saying maybe your job asks you to be more convergent in your thinking, and therefore you're using more of that side of the brain. But I think more than ever now, particularly I would absolutely say in the world of finance, accounting, you can't just be delivering the same service as everyone else. You can't just rely on the fact that you are an expert of X years standing who knows the laws back to front around tax or whatever. You actually have to go, there's a business out there who is our client. They have problems they need solved. We can add value by helping them solve those problems. Sometimes that'll be through the means of accountancy and our expertise. But I find that accountants are great business planners, right? They're great opportunists. They see a path through. They help you get to a great result. That's a creative and a critical thinking skill you can develop. You can actually develop that side of your brain. And I spend a lot of my coaching sessions helping people do that.
Let's delve a little bit deeper into a couple of words you used before in terms of lateral thinking. So maybe can you explain a little bit more about how we can get better at doing that? I think your example just then about the brick was interesting. Because right, the first thing we think about is, well, I'll build a house with it. But, you know, there's so many different things apart from throwing it through a window that we can, well, mind you, sometimes it comes in handy. Inside the house or lock your keys inside the car.
Don't recommend it.
No, that's exactly right. It can be expensive. But yeah, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so look, lateral thinking is a term that was kind of popularized by Edward de Bono. And you've probably heard of De Bono's 6 thinking hats, red hat. People often use black hat out of context, just as a little fun fact. We often say, oh, don't black hat that. Black hat doesn't mean negative. Black hat means let's add some caution and think about the potential risk. It doesn't mean no. So if you use black hat colloquially, just think about it's part of a series. But anyway, De Bono developed what he coined lateral thinking. And effectively, lateral thinking is looking at a problem from a different perspective. And an example I use in my workshops goes like this. Imagine you are the manager of an apartment building and people come to you and they say the elevators are too slow. Now, a literal way to solve that problem is obvious. Make the elevators go faster. Okay? They're too slow, we'll make them go faster. Thank you. A lateral way to solve that problem is to think about it from a different perspective. What does a fast elevator look like? How fast does it go? What does a slow one look like? We don't actually have an actual answer. It's not a fact. It's actually a perception. So if we deal with that laterally, we go, well, what are some other ways we could solve this problem? And you might decide to put music in the elevator so people don't perceive that the time to take from the bottom floor to the top is so long. You might put mirrors in there so they get distracted by their own appearance. So you might find things that solve the problem, but not as it was presented to you. And lateral thinking helps you address the cause, not the symptoms. So in that example, the symptoms are someone complaining that it's too slow. The cause is not the elevators are too slow. The cause is someone is bored in the elevator and they believe it's too slow. So if you then think broader and think about the work that you do every single day and what people either complain about or they ask you to help with or what problems they have, it's about saying, well, there are literal ways to solve problems and sometimes they're appropriate. From a creative problem-solving perspective, it's about trying to laterally look at that, redefining it, looking at it from a different point of view. You can't dig a different hole by digging the same hole deeper. You sometimes have to go, I'm going to look at this from another perspective. I'm going to think about other ways to do it. So lateral thinking is a technique to encourage you to do that. The best exercise I can give you to do that is there are plenty of lateral thinking puzzles online, by the way, if you want to get better at that. But I would say next time you've got a problem, you've either got like a team meeting and you're trying to work through a problem, an internal problem or a problem with a client, anything like that, is say, okay, let's try and answer this 2 ways. What's a literal answer to solve this problem? Because there will be one. Okay, that doesn't work, let's fix it. But what's a lateral way to do it? And lateral basically will be anything that's not that. Anything that's not the literal will be classed as a lateral way to look at it. And the best way to build up that muscle is to practice it. Creativity to me is like going to the gym. I can say I want to get fit and that's great, but I actually know that I have to do something. I have to get up off the couch. I have to go for walks. I have to go to the gym if I do want to get fit. And you've got to think of creative problem solving and creativity in the same way. The real difference between people who think that they're creative or not is confidence, because we're all creative. Yep. And so what we want to be able to do is say, if you feel more confident to use your creativity, use your creative problem solving skills, practice them, but put them into practice. Creativity practice doesn't mean learning an instrument, although it can. That is an application, but it doesn't have to go down those traditional routes. You want to be able to say, okay, I'm going to practice being creative here. I'm going to be divergent. I'm going to think of more options. I'm going to have a lateral approach to this. I'm going to think about it from different perspectives. And I find when you put those things in place and you call them out for what they are, just like exercise, hey, I'm going for a walk around the block, then it's the same thing. You're taking a mental walk around the block.
You mentioned team perspective. Is that a good example, what you just mentioned then, to potentially bring that into the team? You went with the literal and then the lateral, because you're right. Everyone's think, well, let's just make the lift go faster. That's literal. But what's the lateral? So is that something you think you can teams can bring into their lateral thinking and make it a habit?
Absolutely. And if you think about your team, no matter if you've got a small team or a large team, what you really want to have is a team of problem solvers. That's the skill that humans can do really well. And look, the machines are catching up to it. But the problems that machines can solve at the moment are probably more of the routine, menial, predictable paths. But where our value is always going to be as humans, and I believe this fundamentally, is we have empathy where machines don't. We have perspective where machines don't. We have nuance where machines don't usually. We can kind of contextualize solutions. So while AI might be good at time saving, which it certainly can be, it can take some of the menial tasks away. It can help free up time. Use that time you've got instead with your teams to encourage them to be better problem solvers. Because if you've got a team of 20 and 3 of them are great problem solvers and 17 aren't, the most effective way to increase value to your business is to unlock their creative problem solving potential, because they're going to be able to sit with your customers, your clients, and go, I know you're saying it like this, but now I'm thinking about that differently. I wonder if we can help you solve that problem in another way. You're going to realize that incremental value, and your business is going to attract, help with your loyalty for one, but you're going to attract more customers if your people are thinking about things in different ways. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I always love businesses where it doesn't matter if they can solve my problem today, but if I like the way they think,
Yes.
I'm going to come back and ask them again. I'm going to go, this might not be for you guys, but I've just been thinking about this kind of planning thing I'm doing, this strategic plan. I really like the way you think, so could you help with that? And you might look at that and go, well, that's not really one of our core skills or service offerings, but I think we can help you with that. And that's where you can realize some incremental revenue. You can broaden out the scope of your business, but it comes from that core discipline of unlocking the creative problem-solving potential in your team.
You mentioned it before in terms of, you might have 3 creatives and 17 that are not in that team, but how do you bring those 17 into that as such and have them think? What other ideas? You mentioned workshops before and the sort of things that you do with other businesses. What other creative problem solving can you add to our audience right now that are thinking, right, you're probably right, I've got 10 team members or 20 team members, and maybe only the old 80-20 rule might come into it. 20% do things like that, but 80%, I haven't got them quite thinking like that. And I don't want to tell them, but how do we get them involved in it? You got anything else to share?
Yeah, look, I would say that, so I work with small organisations, large organisations in Australia and overseas, and a commonality that I see, no matter what industry they're in or how big their business is that there is problem-solving potential in most teams. And the gap for where that's not realised largely comes down to a term called psychological safety. Now, psychological safety in a workplace environment is, does it feel safe for me to raise things? Does it feel safe that I can talk about stuff? Yeah. What you tend, and think about this through the typical lens of the worker who comes in is very diligent, very productive, very efficient, does a great job, but they come in at 9 o'clock or whatever time, they sit at their computer, they do their work, and they leave at 5, and they're great. You wouldn't complain about them, that they're absolutely worth having, and they're diamonds in the rough. But if you think about, if we could just carve off 30 minutes a day, and so they still get to do all those sort of things, that the reason why we have them, but we could give them opportunities to start thinking about business growth, solving different problems for our clients, doing some research. What you'll soon uncover, if the psychological safety exists in your team, is they'll start offering up suggestions. And the suggestions will sound something like this. Look, I know we've done it this way forever, but I was thinking, ... Or they'll say, Mr. Jones, who came in the other day, he had that question about that tax issue, and I was thinking about it, but now I'm looking at it a bit differently. I'm thinking like this. That's where you know that you've got people who feel psychologically safe that it's okay to raise those things. It's not like, don't ever raise anything because this is the way we do it and it will never change, because you won't last in business if that's your attitude to it. You have people who feel safe to offer that up. So that's the commonality. But then what you want to do is give them the bandwidth, give them the time to do it. I often encourage people in organisations to put in their diary TSC, which is time spent creatively. I do it myself. It's a great hack to do. You put exercise in your diary if you go for a walk, or if you go to the gym at lunchtime or after work. Why wouldn't you put mental exercise in there? So TSC goes in, and time spent creatively then is up to the individual and up to the circumstance. So you might have someone who you think is really good, maybe they're a bit younger and they're really good with social media, for example. So you might say, listen, I'm going to give you 30 minutes of TSC a week, or 30 minutes every 2 days, whatever you like. What I want you to do is I want you to have a think about how we could use social media to grow our business a bit more. And then if you've created that safety where their suggestions are going to be welcome, as opposed to the empty suggestion box problem, which is people put the suggestions in the box and they never get acted on, and so people stop putting them in the box. If you've got that environment, what you'll find is that people will start surprising you at some of the things they've noticed. Like, oh, I really noticed that brand did this, maybe we could do it. I noticed that competitor did that, we should think about that. And that's usually the foundation point. You've got to, the Bruce Springsteen song is, you can't light a fire without a spark, right? Dancing in the Dark. So you need a spark, and those sparks can happen if you allow people the safety and the time, the bandwidth to do it. Google famously have the 1 day a week
That's right.
policy. Now, not everyone can do that. For a lot of people, that would sound really exorbitant. I think that's like a huge amount of time, but they're encouraged to go and pursue other things, because what Google believe is you'll bring back knowledge that can be applicable to Google. You'll be more open-minded. You'll have a bit more of that growth mindset. You'll have more perspectives. And so I think the philosophy of that is really good. I don't think you need to do it to that extent. And maybe in the size business that you're in, you couldn't afford to do that, either from a time or a money perspective. But I think you could find 30 minutes a week for each member of your team to do TSC. If you did that, after a month, I guarantee you, someone would have come up with something that you go, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. That's really good. An efficiency, a new product, a service, something.
Last year, I made a decision to not work Fridays. So 4-day week, and my Friday was my creative day.
Great.
And that was to do whatever that I wanted to do to be creative, to grow the business. So, and a lot of business owners don't do this, like you coach, I coach as well. So when we're in that coaching space, and there was someone I was only talking to today, they're back to back to back to back to back to back to back. Yeah. I'll call you sometime around so-and-so tonight. It's like, you're not allowing yourself even time to think if you're going back to back to back to back. And I know our industry at the moment, the accounting industry, or the professional service industry, is a very busy time of the year, with a lot of stuff going on with BASs, and then May 15 deadlines, and then tax planning. And it's a busy time of the year, and we forget sometimes. I spoke to a firm this morning, and it's like, it's April 10, and we've just come off 2 short weeks, and we've got another short week next week, and suddenly, sort of 15 May deadlines are on us, so we've got a lot to get through. But you've got to allow yourself the time to think and the space to think. So I know when I ran a business maybe 10 years ago, we did it with our team as well. I allowed them 2 hours a week. So I took a little bit of the Google thinking, and I allowed everyone 2 hours a week to just of their own time. And then every single week we would have a team meeting, and we'd come up with, right, what do you think we should start doing? And it's amazing when you enable, love the word enable, when you enable I called it my leadership team, which was the 6 team members that sat below me. When you enable them to be creative, stuff that flows is just phenomenal.
What you said there, Paul, was great about the balance. It doesn't have to be an output all the time. So one of the restrictions on people's creative or free thinking is that if they feel like they've delivered an output at a set period of time. So you could say you've got 30 minutes a week. Let's just use that model. 30 minutes a week, time spent creatively, great. What you want to do is make that accountability for that time over the medium term, not the short term. People don't need to report back to you at the end of the 30 minutes what they've come up with. It's not about that, because that forced pressure doesn't add to the psychological safety, which is so important, we talked about before. What you want to be able to do is say, okay, so we'll give you 30 minutes a week. At the end of the month, just tell us what you've been thinking about. You don't have to deliver a presentation. You don't have to have like this amazing $1 million idea, but we want to hear you thinking. And what that does in terms of someone's mind who's got that time to spend is they know they have to use it wisely, because they do have to present something, but they don't have the pressure of saying, oh, gee, I have to come up with something each week. It's about saying, what did you read? What research did you find? When you had a look at that competitor, what did you think? When you thought about that product or service, tell me your thoughts. Because it's from those thoughts and those shared experiences that if you have your whole team doing it, and you come back together once a month for the share session, okay, let's share what we've got. It's the collaboration between everyone. When someone goes, I was reading this really interesting thing they're doing in fintech. That really is interesting, because that marries up with something I saw in agriculture. Well, what about if and that's where you start getting the ideas to flow. But it's the accountability is an interesting one, because you still have to have it. Otherwise, people just think it's free time.
Yes.
It's not free time. You're paying for it. But it does have to have a degree of trust and a degree of openness that the person feels like they can go to explore. The great explorers, the great creatives that we identify, whether they be in arts or business or Thomas Edison as an inventor or whoever, every one of them talks about the space to think, the time to think as being critical. Einstein famously said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And that ratio is excellent. It doesn't mean we can all do that. But if you think about that in your head as a benchmark and go, You know what? I think if I just divide up this meeting into some thinking time, thinking on my own, bit of daydreaming, bit of research reading, I'm really going to be able to add more inputs to it. And inputs is where you get that divergent thinking. It's like I'm thinking about this in a different way. I will have to come back to a point. I'll have to get an outcome. We'll have to deliver something and execute because we're in business and we have to do that. But
Yep.
you've got to allow the time and the space to kind of breathe and let that come.
The space is an interesting one because just to share a little bit more about how this continued to develop. So hopefully it's helping people online as well. But the team ended up coming up with this, well, we'd like a creative space. It's like, oh, okay. So what does that look like? I said, well, sometimes it's hard, we're at our desks, there's other things going on. We don't want to be, is there a space that we could create? I said, oh, well, what do you guys think? What? And we ended up creating a space for people to go into. Some people like noise. I can work in noise. Other people need complete silence. And we created almost like, and you used the word before, safe. We created a safe space for them, and I had it all painted and made sure that they could go in there and be creative. And then they came up, what about if we worked in teams? Great. What does that look like?
Yeah.
So they worked out that they would like to create teams of 3, and then they've got someone to bounce things off, and great. And then then you end up almost walking away and leaving it to the 6 team members to this create, come up with great ideas, implement.
Yeah, that sounds like a great culture and environment. And knowing you, I know you would have led that with aplomb. So I think, and if you feel like that's something, if you're watching this and thinking like, well, how would I implement that in my business? I think the first place to start is not to bite off too much too quickly. I would just say, listen, I attended this webinar, it's talking about creative thinking, creative problem solving. Throw it open to the team. If I asked you to help come up with some solutions for our business to be more efficient, more profitable, more sociable, better retention, attract more staff, whatever. You pick what's important to you. And I asked you to come up with some ideas for that. How would you like to come up with those ideas? Would you like to have a session where we do it ourselves? Would you like to get a facilitator in? Would you like to come up with a space? Would you like to go for a walk to do it? There's lots of ways to do it, but I think sometimes people feel like they've got to fit within the rules. How do we be creative? What's step one?
Yeah.
The reality is it's not about the step by step. In essence, creativity is not about that. It's actually about trying to embrace the conditions, make the culture safe to share. Imagine an artist going into a recording studio for the first time and playing a riff to the bandmates. It's not going to be perfect, but that's the whole point. You come in and go, oh, I've been thinking about this melody. What do you think about this? And then they build it together. If you replicate that in the office environment, it's going to be, look, you don't have to have the solution. We're not asking for the solution. We want you to think. And as a result of thinking, as a result of the collaboration, we might come up with stuff we weren't able to by just doing our day-to-day business as usual.
Yeah. And is that what you mean? I've heard you talk about before in terms of creative champions. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah. So creative champions is a term that I created because I felt like the perception is back to you're either creative or you're not. And Brene Brown, who's the sociologist who many people might know, she's written lots of books. She talks about something called the creative scar. And the creative scar is something we've all got in childhood where someone at somewhere along the line has either told us or sorted us into you are creative or you're not. And in primary school, which is not the best environment for creativity, I've got to say, and there's a lot of research around that, is that what tends to happen is if we look like we're good at creativity, we look like we can paint, we look like we're good at English and writing and things like that, then a teacher or someone goes, oh, you're creative, away you go. If we look like we're more analytical, and maybe that's a lot of people on this call, we're kind of good with numbers and good with strategies and approaches, then someone will say, oh, don't worry about that creative stuff. You're not creative, but you're very good at this. So once you get past that hurdle and go, no, everyone's creative, we just apply it in different ways, is to work out what's the difference between people who aren't yet performing at their optimal peak in terms of creative output or problem-solving output, and the ones that are. So we think across disciplines here. So I don't want you to just think about this example in terms of musicians and artists and whatever. Think about it in terms of scientists, business people, anyone in the innovation space. What they do to build up that muscle, to become those creative champions, usually revolves around 3 core strengths. That they work on these strengths relentlessly and they use those strengths to help deliver more creative output, more innovative output. The first is one we've already talked about, which is curiosity. That's kind of where it starts. It's kind of like the fuel that gets the engine going. So usually curiosity is the thing that they have in spades, where they're curious about the world. They're really interested in how things work. They want to know why all the time. And maybe you've got a child that asks questions like this: why is that happening? Why does that work? That's a sign of a curious being, as they're asking for the meaning behind the what. The second strength after curiosity is called connections. Connections is something which people can do but don't practice, and that is being able to see patterns, see the patterns in things that don't yet exist. So it's like me saying, you can look at this and see a water bottle, you can look at this and see a phone. Some people will just see them in isolation, but I see a connection. I see, what if there was a phone that had a small water bottle attached to the back? So instead of me having to carry this when I'm out for a walk, I just carry this. And basically what it does is it regenerates water out of the air or something, and I can just drink it like that. So that's a connection that I've made that someone else hasn't made yet, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they have and they haven't invented it yet, but that's just an example.
Yep.
So when you look around you right now, wherever you're watching this, just look around the office or the room you're in and look at things and see not just the individual items, but see the things that had to connect for them to come together. What existed first for those things to be connected and come together? And when you start looking at things like that, you actually start to see that things are connected more than we realize. And so what creative champions are really good at is putting this with that. And, oh, maybe that doesn't make sense. And putting this with that. Oh, that doesn't make sense. This with that. Oh, actually, that could be something really good. So they do that really well. And the third one is courage. Look, courage is one of those things that is difficult to teach, but it's easy to encourage. Courage is something where if you fail, you try and do something creative and it doesn't work, is that you can dust yourself off and go again. It doesn't end your, problem-solving career. You kind of go, oh, well, I can't solve that problem, therefore I can't do it ever again. So it's about repetitiveness. It's about failing forward, making mistakes and learning from them. In creative workshops, we like to say there's no word as fail, it's only learn. We didn't do something wrong, we're just going to do it better next time. So courage comes down to not only that sort of persistence and ability to overcome hurdles, but also the courage to share your ideas. The amount of people I meet, Paul, and I'm going to bet you're one of these actually too, who've got so many ideas up here, and they walk around and go, oh, that'd be good for that. Oh, would that be good for that? But they don't share them because either they're worried what people will think, or they think, oh, if it's that good, someone else would have thought of it. You'd be surprised. I think we're great problem-solving machines, us humans. And what we can do really well is be able to think of problems and think of this, see problems and think of their solutions. The difference with creative champions is they often have the courage to try things and fail and go again. Steve Jobs was a failure before he was a success. You look at, Thomas Edison said, I've failed 1,000 times before I got something right, because they understand that experimentation is creativity. It's not about right or wrong. Unless you're a doctor on an operating table, the risks of trying things new for most of us are reasonably manageable. It doesn't mean we want to make mistakes. It doesn't mean we want to mess up that client thing. We don't want to lose a client through that mistake we made. Less about that, but more about, let's just try a different way, or let's try and do something different. So to answer the question, I know that was quite long form, but there are three core strengths of creative champions. It's the curiosity, it's the connections, and the courage. And they're all able to be learnt, and they're all able to be practiced, because that's exactly what creative champions do.
Because I love being able to talk to my three boys about, let's call it courage, about what can we do different, as opposed to doing the same old, and maybe thinking a little bit different, and maybe taking a different approach. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay that it didn't work. What could we do different, next time?
Exactly.
We sometimes don't bring that into the workplace. And for whatever reason, we don't. And I think maybe because, and I've been involved, and you've been involved, I've got no doubt you would have been involved in these sort of little sessions as well, where you run a workshop with some people and they're quick to judge, aren't they? They're quick to, I know that's a stupid idea. Comments like that, I tell you what, if team members say that team member that gave you that creative mindset thought process won't say anything in the future.
Yeah, they won't come back for more. And that's the psychological safety at work.
Again, that's right.
And, I see this sometimes with people and say, particularly bosses or managers, and say, my door's always open. And I'm like, yeah, let's see how many times people go in and give you something from left field and you shoot it down straight away. Because your door might be open, but you won't be having people coming in very often. I'm always interested in the open rate, how many people are actually opening the door and going in versus just is the door open.
Yeah.
Easy to say, hard to do. But I think I would encourage with teams and encourage this for yourself is to have a think about the word yet. Um, we don't know how to do this yet. We can't figure out a solution yet. Um, we don't know how to solve this problem yet. When you add yet to things, it actually encourages you to go back to the well and try something different. There's always been processes and systems, and they work because they work, but it doesn't mean they're the end answer. You can't tell me that an accounting practice that was existing in the 1970s is still used today because that's the tried and true way. It would have been innovated. There would have been new technology that would have moved it along. There would have been changes in our human behaviour, changes in client expectations, whatever has led that. And somewhere along that journey, if we looked at the history of that, we'd see that somewhere along the line said, this is a problem. We don't have a solution yet. We don't have a solution yet. Wait a minute, let's try this. That didn't work. The history of innovation is littered with experimentation. And
Yes.
in some ways, I wish innovation, that word, was replaced with experimentation. I think if it was called experimentation, I think we'd be more encouraged to use it. I think when it's innovation, it feels a bit like, oh, we're not very innovative, or that's
Yes.
a big deal. Or it's actually a really interesting topic. We can maybe explore it another time as well.
You sort of spoke about before with AI as well. And I think it's one of the greatest challenges and we see it with our kids. They're more quickly to go and ask Google or go and ask Siri, who give them the answer. And it's a funny thing. My kids do it all the time. Hey, Google, and no, stop. And then let's ask the question around the table. What do we think first before we go and ask Google? But I like your thought process around the yet bit. We haven't found that yet. Tell us about what your thoughts are about artificial intelligence, AI. And, I know for those of you that are online that were at the Accountants Expo, was that last week or the week before? Maybe two weeks ago. There's a firm out there and he's going to be a guest on this masterclass probably in the next couple of months. And he's an accounting firm that's created a bot that does some incredible things that is going to transform. We talk about disruption let's call it a tech sense, and we've spoken about Steve Jobs and Google and all these sorts of, the disruption. This is truly going to disrupt our industry, which is going to be incredible. So what's your thoughts on how AI is going to be working through it, how we work at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to profess to be an expert in artificial intelligence, although I did realize today I'm speaking about it on a panel in about 6 weeks, so I might have to get up to speed pretty quickly. But let me talk to you about the current conversation around it. I think is probably the best way to frame it. Artificial intelligence, you should have an open mind to, like all technology. You shouldn't say that's not for us or that won't be for us, or to be honest, you shouldn't blindly go and go, yes, absolutely, we should do it either. You should have an open mind and explore its potential. I think artificial intelligence in terms of problem solving is going to be great for a part of that process. The part that it's going to be great for are some of the menial research-based tasks. So just like you said, with the kids saying, hey, Google, what will be very native to kids our age, our kids' ages, I've got sort of younger teenagers, you're a bit older, is it's going to be very native for them to enter the workforce having used a degree of artificial intelligence on homework, study, research. The naysayers will go, oh, well, they're not going to learn as much like that. And yes, of course, we still want to have those conversations where we can explore critical thinking in different perspectives. So it's not going to replace it. But what it can do really well is it can speed up the research process by giving you a whole heap of information really quickly. But what you should then encourage, either in your kids, your workers, yourself, is to keep developing the critical thinking and analysis of that information. Because effectively what a lot of the generative AI applications like ChatGPT and others do really well now is scrape and present, scrape and present. Oh, you want this? Scrape and present. They are dealing with stuff that already exists. So that's good. There's no problem there. Over time, of course, that will have an impact on the workforce because perhaps some of those tasks that were done by humans will be done by machines if they're not being done already, but they'll be time-saving, money-saving tasks. What you then want to deploy your workforce or your human brains into is, okay, so if that's one perspective, what's another? let's look at this critically. Let's analyze the impact of that, because machines aren't quite there yet, from my knowledge. As I say, I'm not the expert in the field, but from all my reading and research and work that I do, they're not quite ready yet to say, well, you should do it this way, because they're very good at going, well, let me present you all the options. And I think if we continually develop our critical thinking, our creative problem solving skills, our curiosity, our questioning, our ability to empathize with customers, empathize with suppliers, we're still going to be valuable and we're still going to be needed. And hopefully we have more time to be needed and valued in ways that are incremental to our customers' needs, not just servicing them as we have. We can provide more advice, we can provide more services, we can look at more ways of helping them more holistically rather than just on task-based things that often we get asked to do.
Wade, I know we've covered a lot. Is there anything there that we didn't cover that you would like to touch on?
There's a couple of things I would love to talk about. One is the distinction between possibility and probability. It's a concept that happens in really creative environments and in really yet to be creative, non-creative environments. And what this is it's a tension that exists. It's a bit of an invisible tension. And you sort of brought it up, Paul, in an earlier example about a meeting. So imagine you're sitting in a meeting and it's an everyday work meeting. There's no special agenda or special topic. It's just a work meeting. And someone says, "Oh, why don't we give all of our clients a bunch of flowers on their birthday?" And someone, usually in a managerial position, someone will go, "Oh, that's going to cost too much." So what's happened in that little microcosm is a possibility has been raised and a probability has squashed it. Now, that's not to say that's not the right answer. It might be too expensive. But what you want to do when someone raises a possibility in a work environment is encourage more possibility. So in that example, I would say, okay, cool, that's an interesting idea. What are some other things we could do? Anyone else got any ideas we could give? Oh, yes, well, why don't we take clients out to lunch? Or why don't we do this? And you might end up with a position where you've got lots of possibility. And you go, great, now we've got all these possibilities. Now let's actually get into probability. So the probability is the flowers cost too much. Great idea, Jenny, about the lunches, but that won't be good. But Tom, your idea about sending them a personalized email, not just the standard emails we send out, but something where we kind of sign a card, take a photo and put it in an email for them, that's a really good idea. We like that one. So the tension that you want to look out for in any meeting environment, if you're looking for creative problem solving, is to not jump in with probability too early. It still has to happen, but you're going to take the possibility oxygen out of the room by judging as you go. You want to just let that go a little bit longer, not for hours, but just, let's get a few more ideas, guys. Let's see how we go. And that's an important thing. Another tension I'll talk about is something called manufacturing versus making. If you are literally on a manufacturing line, then this answer isn't for you. But I'm feeling like no one on this call is. A manufacturing line has been designed and is designed to scale whatever's coming down the line as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Sometimes in our thinking, we're in manufacturing mode, which means that we are just pumping things out. Click this, send that, click this, send that, input this, out it goes. And that's sort of like the manufacturing mode. If you can encourage you or your team to spend time in the making mode, what it means is you're going to spend time, instead of just following the process, you're going to sit back from it and go, all right, every single time I click that button and that button, that button. Now, that's obviously how the software is designed, so I can't change that. But this is the best way to solve that problem. And you might, through some critical analysis, go, actually, yeah, you know what? This is the right way. But you just never know. I mean, you could be sitting on something that no one has bothered to take the time to think about because you have, or your team have. They might go, okay, if I was to make something that solved this, what would that look like? You could be sitting on something that you could develop as an idea and you could be the leader in your industry. You could have the next $1 million app idea just because you've thought about it and no one else has taken the time to do it. So watch out is most of the time we spend our time in manufacturing mode, but allow a little bit of time, just a bit like time spent creatively, to be in that making mode. If we were going to make something, what would that look like?
I think a lot of times you're having those conversations sometimes, yeah, you might end up going, why didn't I think about that?
Yeah.
That sort of comes
isn't that a great test? How often does that happen when you go, oh, that's such a great idea. Why hadn't they thought of that before? That's that example. Well, the difference is someone actually thought about it. And the difference they had was they took the time to think about it. They probably experimented and failed a few times, and then they got something right. Yeah. That is literally the difference in most things.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I was on workshop. Doesn't look like we've got any questions coming through, so we'll wrap up pretty soon. But I can remember
Sure.
I was on a workshop only maybe a couple of months ago, listening to a couple of guys that were very, very good. I got so many great ideas from them. Had to get up very early because it was over in the States. So I was up at like 3 o'clock in the morning trying to listen to this, and great fun when you're getting up, and I didn't function very well for the rest of the day. Although the thought process was, you know what, it's as you were saying, it's okay to not get it right first time.
Yeah.
They put it down to it's an investment. It's investment to get it right.
Yeah.
And it's so true. You know, we're all sometimes so afraid to fail. We use the word fail, as opposed to it's an experience. And you use the word fall, you know, so it can easily be an experience. Wade, thank you. Thanks for joining us, mate. It's been a pleasure having you as a part of this Empire Masterclass series. And I hope everyone got heaps and heaps and heaps of content out of what you've just spoken about for the last 60 minutes or so.
Thanks, Paul, and hope someone takes something out of it, especially time spent creatively. Do that.
Right. One quick one. People want to find you. Where do they find you?
thecreativecoach.com.
There you go. Thecreativecoach.com is where you would find Wade if you've got any more questions. Otherwise, shoot me a message anyway, and I will put you in touch with him. Till I see you guys next time, thanks for joining us again, and enjoy the rest of your day.